Hi, I'm Lauren from Equation, and today I'm joined with Katie Cliff from Leeds Beckett.
Hi, my name's Katie. I'm part of the careers team at Leeds Beckett. And prior to being at Beckett, I've also spent a lot of my time in HR. So I've done a lot of work with students and graduates in various graduate recruitment roles. So I've spent quite a lot of time looking at CVs and applications. So hopefully I can share some of that experience with you today.
Yeah, so Katie and I today are going to be talking you through what makes a good CV, some tips really, do's and don'ts, and really what's going to make your CV stand out when you're sending it to future employers or recruiters.
Okay, so first impressions in terms of the aesthetics, it looks impressive when you first open up it. It looks different and the design is good, but we'll come back and talk a bit more about that, I think, when we've actually focused in on the content. In terms of my kind of first thing I would focus in on, if I was writing for this, staring at that kind of blank piece of paper, would be getting kind of key contact information down. So I really like the fact that the main thing, your name, your identity is really big and bold on the screen there. You've got the information in terms of your address, postal address, you've got in there your email address, and you've got some contact information. Interesting you've included this as well, so you've put a note around Leeds, West Yorkshire, so that gives some clarity to me about potentially where you are job hunting and the location you're job hunting in. Probably one thing I'd mention here is just this is a landline number. I'm not sure if that is the quickest, fastest way to get in touch with you, then keep that on. I imagine most people I see have a mobile attached to their ear, so I'd make sure that you've got a mobile number. If you have got one, that you've got it on there. That's probably more likely where I'm going to try and contact you if I'm trying to get in touch. Just one other thing I would probably have in that key information section is if you've got any links to social media accounts, and in particular the professional social media accounts. So if you've got a LinkedIn address, you can include it in there. That might be a place that someone might go and direct to as the first look, having seen your CV, to get a bit more information about you. And any other relevant professional social media accounts you might have. So obviously on this one it's talking about digital marketing, so you may well have a kind of digital footprint in other areas of social media too that are really relevant to what you're looking to do. So have a think about whether that's something you want to include.
Yeah, definitely. If you've got an online portfolio, which is quite common with marketing, that's definitely a good thing to add on. So the next thing you want to be put in after your summary is your education. So from your degree right back to your GCSEs is what you want to include. Put how many GCSEs you've got, what grades they range between. You don't need to put every single subject down.
No, I'd agree with that, but what you might want to include is often people will be interested particularly in what you've achieved in English and maths. We see that quite a lot in opportunities that come through, so might include English and maths as a separate point, but the rest can combine.
Yeah, they're key ones. Then move on to your A-levels or BTECs, whatever you did after GCSEs prior to your degree. Include again what grades you got in those, what subjects. Then the next thing is your degree, which is obviously what you're doing now. It's a very big part of your life and is obviously influencing what you want to do as your career. Not always directly relevant to what you actually want to do as a career. For example, with mine, I did psychology, which isn't directly linked to marketing. So one thing you could do is pick out any modules that might be relevant to it. So I could maybe discuss modules such as the psychology of language, which could link to marketing. People in the social world is another one that could give you an idea of what it's like to work in marketing.
Definitely. I mean, if for many of you, if the degree is really your full-time occupation at the minute, make sure that's really front and centre on your CV. The other thing I would say, like you was suggesting, a lot of people do end up doing something as a degree, but then doing something different in terms of what they then go on to. So it's worth thinking about, like you say, what modules you've done. Think about the skills you're learning through that work as well. So if you've part of one of your modules might include an assessment which is project related, we'll break that down and maybe share a bit more detail about that project and think about the skills that you've developed through doing that assessment that would be relevant heading into a new opportunity. And shout out about grades, so make it clear how you're progressing. I think sometimes people feel they can't write about their degree until they've actually achieved it and completed it. And make sure it's front and centre on your CV, I think, is the best advice.
Yeah, put what you predicted. If you predicted a first or a 2-1, or just put it down. So after your education then, the next thing you want to really be putting is the experience that you've had. So the professional experience, the paid work that you've got, and also your voluntary work as well, any other bits that you've done. kind of throughout your degree or before you started definitely would include. I would say anything that's directly relevant to what you want to go into, put that first, because that's the first thing that an employer is going to see. So for example, I did a placement with a social media marketing company. So that's the first thing that I put on my CV. So the future employers know straight away that I've got marketing experience. Key things, putting down what you did in the role, so your responsibilities, really tailoring that more towards what the role is. So that if the role says you need to know how to manage all the social media accounts, then put in that part, I've managed several social media accounts. They know you have that. Probably put some achievements in as well, any numbers that you've had, anything like that, any numbers, any statistics, then I'd include that.
Yeah, think about where, from you being in that role and being in that organisation, what difference did you make? How can you quantify your own particular contribution? I think it's really important. Yeah, I think it's really important that you value all experience that you have, whether that is directly related, as you say, to perhaps the direction you're going in, or it's part of the experience or the work that you've gathered to help you as you're supporting yourself through university and to build up some other experience in the voluntary sector as well. So do value it all. I guess if the experience isn't necessarily as directly related to where you're heading, then think about the skills, think about what you're using as part of that role that you could take into another environment that might be more or might be relevant to the work you're looking to do in the future.
Yeah, I think hospitality, retail, things like that, a lot of students have experience in, which is really good. It builds up so many good skills.
Absolutely.
Kind of teamwork, confidence, everything like that. So don't ever think a job isn't a good job. Anything that you've had is really building up those skills.
Definitely, yeah. So we've talked about education, we've talked about your work experience. So the next section here is around interests. So this is a chance to show a bit more about you as an individual. So think about what you want to share in terms of your outside interests, whether that's something you're involved in sporting, whether that's keenness in travel, whether you're a big music fan, just something which shows you a bit more as a person, a whole person, a more of a rounded individual. So, and often is the starting point or is a good way to kind of create a connection with the person on the other end that's reading their CV.
Yeah, I really struggle with this section. I always think I don't have a hobby, I don't play a sport or anything like that. So I think, what do I actually do outside of work, outside of uni? So I mean, when I did this, I love travelling. Yeah. It's something you don't do as often as playing football or something like that, but that's something that I definitely love to do. Yeah. Also, quite a social person, like going to the cinema, going out for food. Yeah. So it's things like that, things that you might not outwardly think are interests as such, that are great ways to just show who you are as a person. Yeah,
this is a chance to show what you're really passionate and interested in, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, we've come to the end of kind of what I've included or what I would think to put on my CV. Is there anything that you think I've missed that I should probably include?
Well, yeah, I think there's some of the things that you might want to consider depending on whether they're relevant to you. I think it's good to be able to show how competent in your level of computer literacy. That's something more and more that people will be interested in. So think about that in the context of perhaps the professional digital literacy that might be needed in industry. So whether that's anything from your competence around Microsoft through to any particular databases that you might have used either as part of your university studies, or it might be through things that you've used, in-house systems that you might have used in work placements that you've had. So something for me around digital literacy and actually making that particular point on your CV, I would encourage, because that, wherever you're working, in most workplaces these days, there's an element of technology involved in the work that you're going to be doing. So that might be one thing. Something else you might want to think about is just if you've got any particular awards or achievements. So, for example, we see people having done things like Duke of Edinburgh. If you've got that, that's probably not come up in other parts of your CV. So you might have a section which talks about particular awards or achievements that you've got like that, or indeed things that you're involved in, any programs or initiatives you might be involved in university or beyond. So make sure you've really got everything down, all of the things that you could talk about or might show you, again, as a more rounded individual.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, so another thing I've not included on here is references. It's not particularly something you need in great detail. It's something that at the time when it's required, the employer will come back and ask you anyway. If you want to include it, I'd probably just put references available upon request. But what I'd say is make sure that you do have some lined up. You've spoken with past employers or tutors, so that when they ask you for that, then you can get that straight away.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it can take up quite a bit of space on your CV that you could use more usefully elsewhere. And like you say, you'll get asked for it if the time comes that they're wanting to write and get a reference for you. So you're ending up repeating information, and probably it might be a change from, depending on what the role is, from who you might ask one time to another. So yeah.
So now we've got all of the information on our CV, the next thing really is making it look nice. It can make such a big difference opening a CV with this format, for example, the one that's just constant text. It really makes it stand out when you're looking at a lot of CVs. Definitely. It's more memorable.
Yeah, I always think, just imagine what someone might think in that first impression when they either open it from their inbox or they might be looking at through some online system. What's that first impression when that CV opens up in front of your eyes? And you want to make that a good first impression, and a lot of that is about the design before you've had a chance to even get an impression about the content.
Yeah, definitely. You can tell a lot from a CV from the design. If you see a good design on a CV, you automatically have a view that it's going to be a good CV, which obviously isn't the case. You've still got to get the content right, but that first impression can really make a difference on how you view that CV.
Yeah, and I think, this looks particularly design-led, I think, in terms of, and it doesn't have to be that you're an expert on graphic design to make it look this way. There's lots of good templates that you could use, but it is even down to the details. So for me, having consistency is really important. So anything from the font is the same font throughout, or if you're using a font, you might have a consistent font for titles, a consistent size. It really is that detail, I think, that really makes and gives the impression of someone that's professional, that's really taking an interest and wants to make that good first impression. So yeah, really pay attention to that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And using bold and italics to really make certain things stand out. So for example, I've put the companies that I did in bold, and then the role that I did in italics, just so it kind of separates that out and you can very clearly see where I've worked, what I've done. So there's no kind of confusion when you're reading through that.
Yeah. And, remember your capital letters. Remember when it's the capital, when it's the lowercase, get things right. And obviously a final check through on the spelling, and checking the spelling and grammar is spot on. Again, this is all about that really positive first impression. This is the first time that someone might have even heard of you or seen you, and you want to make sure that they kind of leave that looking at that CV with a good idea about whether you might be a good person for that role or opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Make sure you proofread it and get someone else to proofread it. Yeah. Get your flatmate or your parents, anyone that's around, just get them to have a look through it.
Yeah, you can get a bit gloss over if you've been looking at this and you've been working on it for a little while. It's a good idea to get someone else to get a second pair of eyes on it and just get a view on and pick up any details or anything that's maybe not that clear as well. When they read it through, it might be very clear to you because you know what you're talking about, but someone else might just be able to point out a few questions and make sure that it's the best it can be.
Yeah, I think one other thing as well is obviously my CV's on one page. With the layout, it's managed to fit it into one page a lot easier. Yeah. But it can go on to two. I'd probably say no more than two, really. Yeah. Keep it concise. Yeah. If it goes on to more than two, then it possibly is that you've put too much information in it. Yeah. So kind of see how you can cut that down and make it more concise.
Definitely. Keep it concise, but also, like you say, don't compromise on the content just to squeeze it all into one page, because actually we talk about, typically 1 to 2 pages as being a good length for a CV.
Hopefully you've done it, it's completed. So all that there is to do now is to save it, which can be equally as important as the rest of it if you don't do it right. So as a rule of thumb, I'd say save it as a PDF. That way, if you're working from a Mac or from Microsoft, then it'll just stay consistent and make sure that they can open it and there's no issues with the transfer. And think about the file name. I definitely think about the file name. So you can end up, I certainly remember from days of recruiting where you end up with a lot of CVs and actually everyone saves it as cv.doc, but just making sure it's saved with your name and CV would be, my advice. Yeah. No, absolutely. So hopefully you've all found this useful. Thank you for coming in and doing this with us. And if you have any questions at all, then you know where to find us.